Right. Okay, thank you, Gerald. And welcome, Simon, and any late arrivals for session 17 of our 24-part permaculture design course. It's already been quite a journey, and we have got to the stage now where this is term 3, and I thought about breaking the course up into sections, and because I think this third term it's much more interactive. It's much more actually looking to the participants to be feeding back to us. I want to understand how you are translating and receiving these ideas, how you're applying them in your own circumstance, and we want your feedback. So we're encouraging you to use these design tools that we've been talking about to apply to your home, your compound, your community, your farm, your garden, wherever you are, and begin to think about. Now, again, we've tried to really make it clear that there's a sense of there's not a priority in how we go about these things, and we'll be kind of looking for a sense of strategy in how you approach problem solving and how you approach design. I think yeah, this whole process has been very, very interesting indeed. So here we go. Let me just take you now to this week's page, and we are looking at on the academy.sector39.co.uk. we have a page created called Small and Slow Solutions, PDC 23, number 17. I've just put a little graphic there, something I created for something else, but just to give a flavor, to give and here are our resources for today. There's a presentation which I've prepared for later, and I'm going to introduce you to a Japanese gentleman, sadly passed away now, called Masanobu Fukuoka. And Fukuoka. And in the 1970s, Fukuoka, in his late 60s, produced a book called One Straw Revolution, which was translated into English and really served to inspire a whole generation who were looking for an alternative to agriculture, to industrial, chemical-based farming. And the whole world, really, so much of the world had been taken down this route, the so-called Green Revolution. And very quickly, we seem to have sort of a collective amnesia, and we forgot much of what had gone before, and came to thinking that industrial agriculture is the only way to do things. And Masanobu Fukuoka was one of those pioneers who was there in the 1970s to remind us that it was not. So I have a PDF version of his book, and it is on our webpage, and it's a 3.3 megabyte download. You'd be interested. I strongly recommend it. It's really, really readable. You instantly can't but help like the guy, like the way that he's thinking, and are kind of inspired by his journey. So I recommend that. And it really sits within today's principle of small and slow solutions. We've got a huge monster set of challenges, problems coming at us over the horizon. We've got climate change, we've got resource depletion, we've got oil crisis, we've got countries going mad trying to start wars. Oh, how do we respond to all of that? How do we respond to this kind of nightmare that's coming at us? And you might be tempted to think, and you could be forgiven for thinking, that the answer to a huge, big, scary problem is a huge, big response. Permaculture tells us that the problem with a huge, big response is, what if we're not right? What if we're only partly right? What if our response doesn't exactly, hit the problem? How do we fine tune it? What happens if we've invested in the wrong thing? The wisdom that comes from permaculture is we need to initiate thousands and thousands, millions even, small and slow solutions. And what happens with something that's small and slow is if it works, it can grow. If it works, it will develop. As it works, we can fine tune it, we can modify it, we can allow it to reach its appropriate scale and then maybe to replicate. So let's think about how we want to initiate things at the smallest size at which it functions and allow it to grow until the size starts to get in its way, and then we can replicate. So the permaculture model, the pattern for creating change, is we set in motion thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, small and slow solutions, but they're informed by the ethics and guided by the principles, so that and running on feedback, on that principle 4, that we understand that we're constantly receiving information back from whatever it is that we've initiated. And the permaculture design process is very much we set our design in motion, we concentrate on getting the key elements in the right place, and then as the design starts to unfold, we let the design present its own evolution. We don't try and control every variable. We put our faith in nature. We put our faith in the ability of complex systems to slowly self-organize. So let's think about how we're not going to control every aspect of our design. We're going to let our design run, and then we might interact with it to steer it, to modify it, to add in elements, and to respond to the feedback that we get. And we do this through active observation. So this first principle, that the observe and interact, it never goes away, it never ends. We're always observing and interacting, we're always accepting feedback and interacting with the systems that we're developing in a way in which we can, tweak, steer, and moderate so that it naturally evolves. So don't go and spread all your energy out there in a big splurge. Start small, start from close to home, start from a concentrated area that can then overflow and naturally grow. Okay, so I'm going to click on the One Straw Revolution button. And here comes the book, 1978. I thought I might read a couple of passages out of it. I want to bring us all into a slightly different mindset. And it tells the story of his life, really, in the book. And very much his life has been, we're talking about 30 years of active observation of his farm, of his father's farm. He gave up his job in the city, came back to the countryside. He felt he needed to do this. And what he has to say is really quite extraordinary. So I'm going to read a couple of passages out of it to get us into the mood. He says, "I believe that a revolution can begin from this one strand of straw. Seen at a glance, the rice straw may appear light and insignificant. Hardly anyone would believe that it could start a revolution. Nevertheless, I've come to realize the weight and power of this straw. For me, the revolution is very real. So again, he's already talking about how to make significant changes in the world. You begin with the single straw of rice. Look at these fields of rye and barley. Ripening grain will yield about 22 bushels, 1,300 pounds per quarter acre. I believe this matches the top yields in the whole of Ehime Prefecture. If this equals the best yield in Ehime Prefecture, it could easily equal the top harvest in the whole country, since this is one of the prime agricultural areas in Japan. And yet these fields have not been ploughed for 25 years. To plant, I simply broadcast rye and barley seed on separate fields in the fall, while the rice is still standing. A few weeks later, I harvest the rice and spread the rice straw back over the fields. It is the same for the rice seeding. The winter grain will be cut around the 20th of May, about 2 weeks before the crop has fully matured. I broadcast rice seed and rye and barley. After the winter grain has been harvested and the grains threshed, I spread my rye and barley straw over the field. I suppose that using the same method to plant rice and winter grain is unique to this kind of farming. However, there is an easier way. As you walk over to the next field, let me point out that the rice there was sown last fall at the same time as the winter grain. The whole year's planting was finished in that field by New Year's Day. You might also notice that white clover and weeds are growing in these fields. Clover seed was sown among the rice plants in early October, shortly before the rye and barley. I do not worry about sowing the weeds. They reseed themselves quite easily. So the order of planting in this field is like this. Early October, clover is broadcast amongst the rice. Winter grain then follows in the middle of the month. In early November, the rice is harvested, and then the next year's rice seed is sown and straw laid across the field. The rye and barley you see in front of you will grow in this way. In caring for a quarter acre field, 1 or 2 people can do all the work of growing rice and winter grain in a matter of a few days. It seems unlikely there could be a simpler way of raising grain. This method completely contradicts modern agricultural techniques. It throws scientific knowledge and traditional farming craft right out of the window. With this kind of farming, which uses no machines, no prepared fertilizer, no chemicals, it is possible to obtain a harvest equal to or greater than that of the average Japanese farm. And the proof is ripening right before our eyes. So he starts with this passage and he's saying the satisfaction. 25 years into natural farming, his yields are rivaling that of the most intensive cultivation. And of course, puts compared to outputs are massively disproportionate. Whereas in the intensive system, the imports, the tractors, the plowing, the fertilizers, it represents more energy than the actual value of the crop. It's a little confusing reading it. The insight that we're getting is that he sows the seed of the next crop before he's harvested the one that's already standing. So just as those seeds are germinating, they can withstand being walked on when he comes and harvests. So the soil is always occupied. It's a continuous, permanent cultivation that he's evolved to suit the conditions that he's in. So let's think about that. So he's actually explored a permaculture technique for continuous cereal production, and one that rivals the outputs of even the most intensive farms in the best farming area. So right in there. we'll go a little bit further, because it just also is something for us as permaculture people to really take on board here. Recently, people have been asking me why I started farming this way so many years ago. Until now, I have never discussed this with anyone. You could say there was no way to talk about it. It was simply, how would you say it? A shock, a flash, one small experience that was my starting point. That realization completely changed my life. It is nothing you can really talk about, but it might be put something like this. Humanity knows nothing at all. There is no intrinsic value in anything, and every action is a futile, meaningless effort. Now, this may seem preposterous, but if you put it into words, that is the only way to describe it. So he tells us a bit about his personal history and quitting his job and coming back to the countryside. And well, that was the bit I wanted. So I was going to say a little bit more, which is, he called this a do-nothing form of farming. Hands off. Nature knows best. Nature's our teacher. So this goes up kind of almost beyond permaculture. But bear with me, because there's a few key ideas here. For 30 years, I lived only in my farming and had little contact with people outside of my own community. During those years, I was heading in a straight line toward a do-nothing agricultural method. The usual way to go about developing a method is to ask, how about trying this? How about trying that? Bringing in a variety of techniques, one upon the other. This is modern agriculture, and only results in making the farmer busier and busier. My way is opposite. I was aiming at a pleasant, natural way of farming. Farming as simply as possible within and in cooperation with the natural environment, rather than the modern approach of applying increasingly complex techniques to remake nature entirely for the benefit of human beings, which results in making the work easier instead of harder. How about not doing this? How about not doing that? That was my way of thinking. I ultimately reached the conclusion that there was no need to plow, no need to apply fertilizer, no need to make compost, no need to use insecticide. When you get right down to it, there are few agricultural practices that are really necessary. The reason that man's improved techniques seem to be necessary is that the natural balance has been so badly upset beforehand by those same techniques that the land has become dependent on them. This line of reasoning not only applies to agriculture, but to other aspects of human society as well. Doctors and medicine become necessary when people create a sickly environment. Formal schooling has no intrinsic value, but becomes necessary when humanity creates a condition in which one must become educated just to get along. Before the war, when I went up to the citrus orchard to practice what I then thought was natural farming, I did no pruning, and I left the orchard to itself. The branches became tangled. The trees were attacked by insects, and almost 2 acres of mandarin oranges withered and died. From that time on, the question, what is the natural pattern, was always in my mind. In the process of arriving at the answer, I wiped out another 400 trees. Finally, I felt I could say with certainty, this is the natural pattern. To the extent that trees deviate from their natural form, pruning and insect extermination become necessary. To the extent that human society separates itself from a life close to nature, schooling becomes necessary. In nature, formal schooling has no function. So he starts to think about his sort of do-nothing approach. Almost everyone thinks that nature is a good thing, but few can grasp the difference between natural and unnatural. So we talk about all the time observing nature, and nature's our teacher, and nature's a good thing. But are we really listening? If a single new bud is snipped off a fruit tree with a pair of scissors, it may bring about disorder that cannot be undone. When growing according to the natural form, branches spread alternately from the trunk and leaves receive sunlight uniformly. If this sequence is disrupted, the branches come into conflict, lay one upon another and become tangled, and the leaves wither in the places where the sun cannot penetrate. Insect damage develops. If the tree is not pruned, the following year, more withered branches will appear. So this is kind of the key, perhaps, to what Fukuoka is telling us, is the more we interact with nature, the more we disrupt the natural flow, then the system then becomes reliant on us. So once you started pruning your fruit trees, sorry, that was just to get a message from someone who probably wants to send some money, which I'll just quickly do. Sorry. Sorry. Fukuoka is telling us that a lot of these techniques that we're talking about, our strategies for farming, for agriculture, we're actually using these techniques because we manage the land, because we've created imbalance, because we've made lots of interactions without actually understanding how that affects the functioning of the plants and animals that we're interacting with. This book is a treasure trove of ideas and of inspiration. What is clear from reading it is that Masanobu Fukuoka was a great observer of nature, and he allowed nature to teach him. So what he talks about is it took him 30 years of do nothing farming to steer his land back into balance and into harmony. So here's something to bear in mind as we go forward, is permaculture is not an instant solution. It's not going to just fix your problems overnight. It's going to be a process in which you're going to move into it and slowly allow a system to evolve through your interactions that needs ever less input from you. Your job is going to become more and more just harvesting, learning, tweaking, managing as you develop your system. There's no upper limit to productivity. This was something that Bill Mollison has challenged us to think of. So whatever we're doing, achieving with a piece of land or with our design systems, is we can do more. We can add another species. We can stack in another layer. We can find other ways forward. So really, really interesting. And if I could just, I'll actually go back to the page, our web page for today, and I've put another a video on there, which is it is why insects do not attack healthy plants. And this is going to be the theme of the second presentation, which is that if we create a healthy enough ecosystem, if we create the right conditions for our plants, then they cannot be attacked by pests. And I think also a little bit of what Fukuoka was telling us there is the closer we get to a naturalistic way, then the stronger and healthier our plants are. I have a little friend here, and they actually become resistant to pest attack. And so I'll talk a bit about that in the second presentation. Hello. What we're going to do now, it's a bit frustrating. There's not many of us here. We have someone arriving. Oh, Nicholas is coming. Great. That's so I'm going to step out of the meeting for about 30 or 40 minutes, I'm afraid. And Gerald is going to take the chair and carry on. And this is our chance, beginning of a chance now to get a bit more input from you about how you are thinking, applying permaculture design ideas in your own situations. And I'll let you shape the session with your own words, Gerald. So I'll just hang out for a couple of minutes, but let me pass the microphone over to you, Gerald, and I'll be back in about 30 or 40 minutes.
Okay, Steve. See you then. Thank you. See you. Hi, everyone. Nicholas, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Stella, Simon, you're all welcome. This is going to be interactive. Yeah. We are looking at the design process. We are looking at, yes, for the past 16 sessions, we've been looking at permaculture, resource utilization, bits of systems thinking, and overall design. So what we are going to do is, how do you now holistically incorporate or weave all those ideas into your design process? By virtue of setup, or the setting of the PDCs is usually the last section, or for instance, now the third term that we are into is more onto design and system thinking. Yes, the initial phase looked at utilization, observe and interact, and all through that. Now, this phase is more on the systems thinking and design, but then not as standalone ideas, but still feeding into the bigger picture. In permaculture, nothing exists in isolation. So the integrate rather than segregate option feeds into each and every aspect of permaculture. So here we are. So thinking about your designs, thinking about your systems and your designs more broadly, let's have this interactive. How do you plan to go about? Remember, we said, let's think about designs in their simplest form. You can start with a very basic and grow it outwards. Just as Steve said, small and slow solutions. So you start from, let's say, your backyard, or you start with a very basic within your closest proximity, and then grow that upwards. We usually use the term incremental growth or organic incremental growth, meaning, steadily growing organically. Okay, in no order, or anyone, please, let's go and share your ideas and how you plan to incorporate that into your design process or the overall planning process. Should we start with Simon, then Stella, and Nicholas? Simon, the floor is yours.
This is Simon from Tapa, and I'm Paddy.
Yes, Simon, you're welcome. Over to you.
The principal has just yes, as the principal has just left us, he was talking the issue of pruning. Pruning, as he brought in nature. Yeah, nature is a good thing. Once you prune your plants, you will expect good yields to have come, because those other branches that you may not in need of them, basically, you will have to prune and remove them such that you create a chance of those plants to be healthy in nature. So for us here with the Tapa and the Apad at large, we have got the oranges that we have created by use of the gills, whereby the gills, we have created them as a source whereby we are harvesting water, that running water after rains have fallen down, and we have created the gardens to make them bring that water into that orange, and from that orange we have again created more those gills, and around those gills we have cultivated some sukuma wiki, onion, tomatoes, and in a process of you pruning them all together, you will harvest good yields. And eventually, with nature, it does not harm you in any other aspect or in any situation that comes together with it. At the same time, the yields that are obtained from the onions compared to the yields that are obtained from those other crops or plants which are not pruned, eventually they are not of good quality. They are not of good quality. But those that have been pruned, for sure you will get good yields. And it teaches us that with nature, really, things can be obtained when you practice them well. And with the other aspect of those gills, it again adds some fertility into the soil from that running water that comes from various areas. All that topsoil will be washed, and it comes and it gathers within your gill. There you will have to see that the growth rate at which your plant or your crop is growing when that water has been harvested, it really pleases you that really nature is something good. And as permaculture people, we are to practice it and to teach those other members of the community that really we should incorporate series of things into our agricultural practices such that we can benefit things that are more better. And then he talked of why healthy plants or crops are not attacked by those pests. Really, when you have got all factors that have facilitated you to grow, by the time that pest comes into you, eventually it gets you when you are totally strong. You can resist against all of the attacks that they will bring into your tissue, trying to make you not grow well, but you will resist, and then they will just go away by themselves because of the roughness or the roughness of the crop. By that time, it gets them when it is old. And my chairman here has got something that he can add on what I'm talking. Chairman.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Johnson, Chairman Tapa. What I wanted to talk about, what I wanted to talk about is incorporating things together. Like when you have a grown apple tree, you can use its shade for making tree nursery. Instead of that place being wasted with nothing, you can put there your tree nursery. Or you can use it, those things, and incorporate them together such that you benefit a lot. Because those compost manures, such them you are taking them to the field, it finds when they are still strong, it makes a good function at the field. When we do things natural, when we incorporate natural things together, we shall obtain good yields and good nature as well. That's what I wanted to add on. Thank you.
And then the other one was on the aspect of enterprise selection. I was telling members of PAD that when you are selecting an enterprise, or when you are selecting a project or a crop to cultivate or a crop to grow, one, you have to choose the lifespan of that crop. How long will that crop take you so that you benefit from it? And then the other one is, what are the costs that you are to incur in when you are bringing that crop or that project into your design or into your practice? And then the other one is, what is the duration and where is the market, and who to consume it? So when such kind of aspect of marketing and everything is being introduced, and the type of the enterprise members, we are to go in for an enterprise that we know that it is short term, it is being short term, it should benefit you within that shortage you have incurred in, so that you have to get those hits in a shortest period of time. Then where is the market for those crops that you have grown in, and who is your immediate customer? How beneficial is it to you? To your animals, climate, and life. Giving them tips that we can use so that we bring in good enterprises and enterprise selections, and how to manage them, how to care for them, and where to market them, and at least to see how we can use the available resources that we have at our home states, so that we achieve our dream and our societies. And then again, I was perusing them through of all that we have been talking about on the IPM, because most of them were crying about those other, when they are the these stages and at the field, they were like, they are so notorious, but I was giving them tips on how to manage them well at a maximum way that they can no longer disturb them at any other time. But with the use of nature as our friend, not those other toxins that will harm us. Yeah? It harms the soil, it harms you yourself, and then it harms the crop. So I was discouraging them from using those other things, but in giving them the aspect of making these pesticides, organic pesticides that are friendly to the soil and friendly to the soil, friendly to the crops, friendly to the human beings, both when they are consumed or not consumed, they should be friendly to you, not being poisonous to you. At first, when we were beginning, you were hearing me with my birds in here. I was trying to give them some kind of medication, natural. So I was giving them those tips how we can care for our poultry units using natural aspects, so that when we cooperate, poultry unit is beneficial to the soil by adding the organic matter content and the humus into the soil through their droppings, and then again the output from the field that we get from maize or maize cobs and the maize bran, we can use them for feeding those birds, recycling them, and then at the end of it, you, the human being, you will be in position to eat at least chicken meat once or twice in a week, whereby it is highly proteinous for your health at that time when you are to put it onto your saucepan. So I was giving them that with nature, it needs you to have time. You have what? Time. When you have time, there is nothing that can defeat you. But outside time, when you miss your time, and when you introduce as your project, definitely you will not have to have this promise from that project. Or your goal will not be achieved like we achieve. If you don't take time as something, make your plan, make your plan, and then you see how achievable. Please, thank you. That is what.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, the whole TAPA group. It's always brilliant to have you on board. Andre, you're welcome.
Yes. And I'm sorry for coming late in this meeting.
I think yes.
It's okay. It's absolutely understandable.
Yeah.
So yes, we had a quick introduction by Steve, and then he's slightly off for a quick engagement. He'll be back soon. But what we are looking at right now is how are you planning? Because the phase of our PDC that we are into right now is into systems thinking and the design process. That means obviously the first stage or the key aspect to all that is planning. How are you involving planning into your design. How are you planning your design, or overall, are you able to tell us about how you're incorporating the ideas that we've discussed over the last 16 sessions, because this is our 17th session out of 24. So how are you looking at incorporating? So we are going around, this is an interactive session, and everyone is going to say something. Let's think about design holistically. Holistically means we are looking at everything. Anything can be a design, as simple as it is. Whether it's a business, it's a design, because it involves you processes. It involves you, thinking in terms of processes and elements. Yeah, as long as you have stages, you have elements, and you have processes, it's a design. So let's think more holistically. Whereas most of us think about designs in terms of the base maps, but that's one type of designs. We have several others. If it's an enterprise, it's a design. As long as there is a process, it's a design. So maybe as you think about it, we'll go to the next person. But before we go to that, the TAPA team mentioned very, very crucial and valid points. I could slightly share a quick presentation. We're not going to do the whole of it, but then before I share it, maybe I'll go back to the TAPA team. There is a crucial element which I feel you could hint about how you plan to go about it. That is, you've talked about the marketing, the enterprise development, and then the overall utilization and resource, ensuring efficiency of resources. But then you haven't mentioned anything to do with post-harvest handling, or after you've, acquired all these resources. How are you planning to go about that? Because otherwise, if they haven't reached the market yet, so between, let's say, your farm or your enterprise and the target market, how are you planning to go about that? In between there lies the aspect of, post-harvest handling. Do you have any discussions or measures in place as part of your design? Simon?
Yes. Thank you for giving me again that opportunity. You were talking of the post-harvest handling processes. For us here in TAPA and APAD at large, we are trying to see ways that we engage each member at least to learn all those post-harvest handling processes, so that whoever has been a member in a group, he or she has to cope up with us, because we want to add value into the commodities that TAPA or APAD is producing at large, so that we fetch good market. And get good income, whereby the income will be brought into the circle group of TAPA or an APAD at large, whereby the post-harvest handling processes we are trying to see with our container house here in Kampala, where at least for them to get for us some containers whereby we need to begin packaging our flour. In our flour, we have got some ingredients in it, whereby we have got the Amaranthus species seeds, and then we have got pineapple, dried pineapple. We have got soya bean. We have got millet and millet and some sorghum in it. So we are trying to bring all those items. You will see it having the logo of APAD and TAPA together, and with the sector 39. That is our brand system, as we have agreed in a group of permaculture members of APAD TAPA. So with the post-harvest handling processes, where we have gone through, I've gone through with my members here, whereby from the time of production, what have you done to your soil so that you have to produce? The production itself, it needs some good procedures for you to carry. It says that are recommended for you to produce for us the Amaranthus species. Which Amaranthus species we need at least get at least each person to bring 2 to 3% of Amaranthus seeds. That is one. Is your land fertile enough to produce those post-harvest handling? Is your land fertile enough? What are the agronomic practices that you are doing in that land? Are you adding what we are producing naturally? We don't want to use those artificial things, but we want nature itself to produce for us good things. The agronomic practices in that one has to practice when you are with the TAPA and APAD should be followed up based on our principles and our designs that we are using as the permaculture members. And then two, when you are producing, what are you going to produce as a member? What are you producing? APAD itself has said, produce Amaranthus species of this quantity, so that the production process has to continue. When you go to harvesting, what is the time of harvesting and how are you harvesting? What are the mechanisms that you are using for harvesting? Are you using local methods of harvesting? Are you using machines for harvesting? Are you using scientific methods of harvesting, whereby you are using the bulldozers and so forth and so forth? But for us here in APAD, we are using local methods of producing, of harvesting. But when we are harvesting, where are you going to put your things for good quality? So harvest, putting in a good and a safer place, minus damaging that product or destroying that product, so that it features for us a good market. What we are in is about marketing. How are you marketing? Is your product fetching good customers outside your locality? That is the question that we have given to each and every member of APAD and TAPA. Are you producing the product which fetches good market outside the community or within the community? And when you're harvesting, how are you going to dry it? Are you putting it onto, are you putting it down on the sun? No. For us with the TAPA and APAD, we have said no. At least every member of APAD should acquire a tarpaulin. Once you acquire that tarpaulin, it helps you in the drying processes. That is stage number 3 now. After harvesting, drying. Product. And when you're drying your product, it should be in a clean place so that it will not be in a position to be attacked by the pesticides when you put it into the storage system now. So when you are using a tarpaulin or when you are using those other raised trays for drying your amaranthus species and what, it should be very clean according to the long-term plan of APAD and TAPA. That is what they are planning. Soon we are to tell you, Gerard, see. So drying, how are we drying? All members should at least teach those other people that when you're drying your products, it should be at least on a tarpaulin, such that it remains clean. When they are clean and it is taken to the market, it helps you to fetch good money. And with the influence of a group, it makes us to get high yields. And then after drying, what is the process of processing it? Are you taking it for the grinding machine? Are you using these local? And after you grinding it, where are you putting it? Are you putting them? Are you putting them in the containers? Are you putting them where? Where are you putting them? That is packaging now. I'm talking about packaging. How are you going to package? How are you going to package your commodity? Are you putting it in a container? For us here with the TAPA, we are disagreeing with each image and destroy where the poor disposal of those, of those polythene bags and those plastic materials. Really, it is so shameful for us here with the government of Uganda. We are trying to teach them at least that these materials should be well disposed and burned off, other than just disposing them anyhowly to affect and to spoil our soil, which is not good. Generally, for us here with TAP and APAD, we move around our communities to tell them at least pick those polythene bags, gather them together, and then burn, such that our soil is at a good condition, other than spoiling it at any influence that they think that they are disposing it well.
Wow, thank you, Simon. That is really
Get us to know commodity data. The commodity data has come from branding. You have to brand. So for us here with TAPA and APAD at large, we are seeing a way forward that we are to produce tomatoes that will help us to at least supplement or catch up. That is what we are trying to. We are trying to see that at least members should go at a certain level where they can bring good income status to their families and at the circle and everywhere and everywhere. Branding is very important. You see, with us permaculture, when that sector 39 is there, we know that that is a brand. It is a brand for permaculture for sector 39, and we are subsets. We are subsets of that sector 39. So it is branding that makes us also to know that really we are belonging somewhere other than just being not there. After branding, and then we are seeing that the storage, where are you storing? I think I talked about storage. Yes, I talked about storage. Where are you going to market? Where are you going to market? Are you marketing within the locality? Are you putting it within the locality? Are you taking it abroad? Are you taking it where? So all those post-harvest handling processes, we should all put into our tips so that we can manage them. And then there are these other pests that come in the storage system. Let me talk about it. There are those ones that come into storage. Are you putting it in the store? Are you putting it in the bag? For example, are you putting your maize in a store? And in that store, what are the conditions to make that maize reach up to the time that you want to market it. At least where you are putting it, it should be clean so that those pests will not encroach on them. They will not encroach on your produce.
Thanks, Simon, for that detailed, oh, sorry.
And they will not disturb you in any stage of production. Make sure you are maintaining the hygiene of your store. To me, I emphasize more on the use of the crib. Have you ever seen a crib, Gerard?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So that thing, a crib, I think is the best store for maize and onions. A crib is the best store for maize and onions. It will stay for at least a year, minus attacking on it. It is and what more for members to use.
Okay, okay, and Simon. Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks a lot for that, detailed, holistic, and in-depth kind of design. Yes, that's what now we call a design. If we happen to have if we have that on paper, that would be brilliant. And if you happen to have it, it would be good at some point if you can share it out.
Network.
All right. So, Andre, you have your hand up.
Yeah, yes, thank you very much for giving that opportunity. And I can share some points because my brother Simon is already talking about what I should talk. Yes, about designing and the question that you have asked. My idea is we have already learned about permaculture and we are still learning. And the importance of this course is to learn and to teach other in the community, because we have our community members, we have our like here in the camp, we have our colleague refugees. So we have to learn and to relearn more about permaculture and the other things, because when we learn, we are here to go and teach them, and they will be able to teach us in the community. So my point is the achievement of those things that we are doing is to implement the project. And we can't implement the project if we don't have money or funds, because even we can run activity with your members, but to let the other people in the community to learn what you learned, it can be very difficult. So on that point, what I can share is, let us learn first. And I thank you God because we have brother Steve here. And on my side, I would like to share that idea. If it is possible, we can create a Facebook so that maybe, or a WhatsApp group, so maybe we can share some points, some ideas without being in the meeting like this one. So it can be very important to us to have a group, a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group. Maybe it can help us and to share some ideas like the point that we are going to share in this evening time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrea. And yes, those are very valid, suggestions, and thanks for sharing that. Obviously, knowledge and overall learning is also part of the system. I'm liking the idea that we are getting more holistic, you know, beyond the garden, beyond the, let's say, the homestead. We are looking at it right now more holistic. You can, it's not that we are looking at the farm alone. The farm is simply an element of it. Food production is an element of it. We look at resources and systems from a broader perspective. So if in any case, if learning or empowerment is part of your design, it's really, you know, brilliant that we also take that up. And as we said, if it's not written or if it's not properly documented, here they would say it has never happened. So let's try as much as possible to document our process, the ideas and the resources. All right, welcome back, Steve. And you're welcome to have any input we've so far had from Simon and Andre. So we are yet to have others contribute. Deborah, you're most welcome. Over to you, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Gerald, and thanks for holding the fort there. Yeah, so we'll create another slot for more input from everyone. So we're definitely. Oh, hello. I heard a voice then. No. We'll definitely make more space for interactions. I thank you, Andre, for your comment there. And I think that there's something which we just need to start thinking about as a group is how do we want to maintain communication between ourselves? A WhatsApp group could be a good suggestion. I don't know if people would rather use another application, or if that's one we're familiar with, maybe that might be a good way to maintain contact, you know, as we get more in, you know, discussion with each other and sharing perhaps design ideas. We're working on a design. Gerald and myself and Stella, we're trying to create an Academy of Permaculture. Well, you're taking part in it right now. And we're thinking about how we support each other going forward, and also very much resonating with what Gerald just said is, how do we get your feedback? We collectively need to tell the permaculture story. We need to catch and store the energy, the experience and knowledge that you're gaining, and we want to share that. And I think that that's the currency of our academy, is going to be the work that we engage in, and then the feedback from that, the product from that. So you know, many of us are lucky to have access to things like mobile phones now, and we can take photos, we can take drawings, we can explore how we can do voice recordings, we can share our stories in different ways. And I think that as we develop our academy, we want to reward people for giving us that feedback. So Andre, you know, as you begin to progress your ideas there in Kakuma, there's going to be a very important story to be captured and told and shared, because we're also here. The idea within our Academy of Permaculture is, in some ways, we're all teachers, we're all mentors and learners at the same time. And in our relationships with each other, we can switch between those roles. I might be in the teacher role right now, but in other respects, you know, I'm learning all the time as well. I'm doing my own experiments and things here in Wales, and you know, that's the information which we all, you know, which I have to share, and which you will have to share from your own experiences. So I'll reference you back to my opening comments on this session was I referenced a particular book, Masanobu Fukuoka's One Straw Revolution. It's a 3 megabyte download off the page of our webpage for this week. And it's a fascinating journey into observation. And I think then, and it took him many years before he was ready to tell his story. But I think we need to be more ready to tell our stories, because we're now in this time of, you know, of intense change. I think that part of the power of permaculture is it gives us a common vocabulary to talk about what we're doing. And I'm going to encourage you to try and use the words, the concepts, the vocabulary that we've been talking about, not to be jargonistic, not to make it sound more complex than it is. The heart of it, permaculture, is very simple. It's seeing these patterns. We can relate to that. We have our ethics, we have our principles, and increasingly we have our design tools. And I think it's in that simplicity, it makes it easy then to pass it on, to pass that knowledge on to other people. So I think that David Holmgren did a great piece of work when he came up with this 12 principles, because every book about permaculture that I've ever found, they're always enormous, and with so much information in there, it's a bit scary. And David reduced it down to its very essence with these 3 ethics and 12 principles. So that's why I teach the course in this way, through that framing, because I find it makes it memorable, and it's sort of like it, and it follows through in a sequence. So that's yeah, well, just to explain, really, that's why I do it in that way. So we're only an hour and a quarter in, so yeah, okay, I'll start my next presentation. I want us to think about design. I want us to think about small and slow solutions. That means kind of incremental design, little bit by little bit, working out from established areas, you know, slowly, something that slowly builds on itself. We've also talked about holistic design. We're going to think about it from lots of different angles, and by doing so, we have the potential to draw in many different people to explore these angles. So I'm going to just, I've put together a presentation as a jumping off point for these ideas. And I've also thought about how maybe permaculture gives us a language or an ability to communicate complex ideas to other people, because we need to recruit, we need to build teams, we need to involve the people around us. So that always asks the question is, how are we actually going to do that? So you can just confirm, Gerald, you can see my small and slow solutions slide. Okay, whoops. And here we go. And there's Ali. How do we go about? Let's think about maybe Andre there in Kakuma, or wherever you are. How might we go about initiating a permaculture project? How might we go about, you know, drawing people into that? And so my first slide is of Ali Tebendeki in Butambala, and he started his own permaculture demonstration and learning center. And here what we're seeing is he's working with a group of people to inspire people to see the patterns, to explain his intention. You know, there's maybe, I put a few pictures in here to think about how we might start off the process. So one element of that process is talking to the people around you. Hey, I've got an idea. Hey, let's come together or something. Is and we can use sort of permaculture and the permaculture design idea as a way to bring people together and say, look, very clearly, we've got these really interesting principles to work with. We've got this language of patterns, and it starts with these ethics. And these are things that we can unify around and come together with. The second thing that we might do in our, again, in no particular order, is I've already told you, our design process begins with survey. That's observation. It's asking the questions. What have we got? What are the objectives of the design? What are the functions we're trying to fulfill? If it's a land-based design, we want to actually physically survey that land. We want to go and look at it. What's the soil like? What kind of plants are there? And here we are, we're seeing a couple working with an A-frame. And with that A-frame, they can map level ground. So they're beginning to understand their land by making actual measurements and working out the slope and therefore how water might flow when there's a heavy rainfall and surface water, where that might go. When we survey a piece of land, we want to know where the boundaries are, don't we? We're going to use our set of tools to physically observe. If we start doing these kinds of activities, people will come in and say, oh, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? They have questions. And what we've learned over the years with permaculture, the powerful way to teach it, to recruit, to join people together is through demonstration. And we say, demonstrate, educate, replicate. So Deborah will tell us similar stories. When she went home after her PDC and started making changes to her land, her garden, people immediately had questions. Why are you doing it like this? And from there came conversations. So think about, we're going to do a combination of things. Start off our project is we're going to start talking about it. We're going to start having conversations, using some of permaculture ideas to help illustrate what we're doing. We're going to start actually surveying and measuring the land, asking questions about the land, identifying the resources that might be there. We're going to do the survey part of our SADIMET. We're going to identify who our clients are, who are going to be the beneficiaries of this design, who's going to help shape it and moderate it as it evolves. And again, my advice to you, Andre, if we're going to focus on you there in Kakuma, is start small. Start with a strong group of motivated people who want to learn. You don't have to co-opt people in who aren't interested. They'll come later. They'll come later on in the line. So we're going to start with a small group, and we're going to start using our permaculture principles and ethics to bring us together and to understand that we have a common kind of cause. We're going to do our survey work, and that means actually making measurements and understanding the space that we have. And we're going to draw a picture. We can start with something very rough and very approximate. This is again from Butambala permaculture. Look, we have a very simple drawing, and it shows where the key elements of the design are. We've got a house, we've got a chicken house, we've got a raised bed system, we've got a nursery bed, we've got compost, we've got a toilet. Okay, so I think the key thing in any successful permaculture design is you don't have to think of all of the details straight off, but you need to identify the key elements and make sure you get them in the right place. That's the secret. And once you've achieved that, anyone else coming along, they'll just assume it was always like that. And if something's in the right place, it just becomes functional. So here's a key, here's something to learn. And this is why we draw a picture, is we like to say in permaculture, make your mistakes on paper. You know, if you build your house in the wrong place, put the path in the wrong place, it's a lot of work and time to fix it. So let's especially think of those significant things, the kind of type 1 decisions, the things that involve investment of resources and time and are very hard to change once we've done them. So let's make sure we get the key elements of our design in the right place. And we can make sure we do that by drawing diagrams, by surveying the land, by making measurements, by holding meetings, just sharing ideas, checking those ideas, and then making a representation of that. That's the first part of our design process, perhaps. And then we might draw in layer upon layer of detail as we move forward. So getting things in the right place. Now, remember, I told you about zones and sectors. It's a very simple but very powerful tool to way to look at something, a complex situation, and narrow it down to what are the key points. So we talked about zones, starting from the home zone being the zone 1, and then moving out, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, and then zone 5 is the wilderness. That's the bit you can't change. So we can focusing our energy and having a rational, strategic placement of elements so that they perform functionally. So sectors generally are the things we can't change, like the way that the sun crosses the sky, the shadow from the mountain, you know, the exposure, the elevation, the aspect of the land. Okay, these are things which shape it. How wild animals cross the land. What would happen if there was a wildfire, a bushfire? How would that, where would that come from? Where's the threat? Where would it go? If you think about fire is pushed by the wind, and because warm air rises, bushfires tend to climb uphill slopes. So let's be conscious of where the threat might come and where it might go. What happens if a herd of elephants arrives, or I don't know, or the neighbor's cows? Can we create pathways through the land to allow things that need to cross it? Think about things as flows. Try not to create barriers. So obviously, access for people, access for resources is going to be very, very important. Slope, and obviously the relationship between slope, water catchment, water flows. These are very, very important things to consider. And, you know, where's the fertility? Is the soil all the same? Some areas are very rocky. We can collate these ideas on our map, and we can try out, oh, what happens if we could try placing that element there, or and think about how things might be affected by access, slope, wind, sun, these key things. I'm bringing this now into a summary. I'm saying to you, the key elements of your design, you need to get them in the right place. And the way we're going to do that is to do sector analysis, to draw maps and pictures, to do actual surveys, and to discuss it with our group using permaculture sort of terminology. It's designed to help you achieve that. Okay. So I think this chain of thought that I put together is, I was thinking about building soil. I was thinking about food strategies. And remember from our organizational chart that we've looked at is that first area of building our strategy is around supporting food systems. And I also was thinking about Masanobu Fukuoka, who was telling us that we're moving towards a do nothing kind of farming, a low input kind of farming, a natural way of farming. But we might be starting from land that's very damaged and degraded. So it's going to take, have to accept, it's going to be a process of succession to get from wherever it is that we're starting to the end goal of where we want to go. So realize that in your unleashing your design, it's going to be a journey. Fukuoka talked about 25 years to get to where he felt he'd restored the balance to the land. So understand, you're not going to do it in 5 minutes. This is going to be an ongoing process. And I think it's important that how we communicate our goals and manage the expectations of the people who are going to take part of our project, understand we're now embarking on a journey. And as we move into that journey, we're going to learn so much more about permaculture. We're going to begin to understand what those principles really, really mean. We're going to then begin to decode nature's patterns, and we're going to use the ethical model more and more and more to understand that is the basis of how we come together as groups of people. And I can say this because I've been studying this now for for more than half of my life. As a 60-year-old, I have been doing permaculture for 31 years. And honestly, there's kind of layers and layers of understanding that sort of reveal themselves as you move into it. So we're using these techniques and strategies to join people together to have a common vision that's going to take many steps and stages to get to it. And there's going to be many aspects to this. And it's a chance for everyone to learn and benefit. No matter how little or how much they interact with it and become part of the team, they will learn. We can guarantee that. So here's our initial stages, and then as we begin to fine tune our design, and we're going to focus on thinking about identifying what those key elements are, and make sure that they're located in the right place. And then from then, our process can begin. So we know where our home zone is. We know where our cultivation zone is. So we're going to put our dedicated seed bed somewhere between the two. Something that needs a lot of attention and observation. We don't want to put it out of sight, do we? Something with valuable, delicate seedlings, we want to have that close by to where there's going to be a constant observation and a maintenance function, right from the word go. So it's a lovely picture. I do believe this was from Deborah. And I was trying to work out, is these the same guys? I think this is a different group, but here we go. Local and natural resources, Andre. This didn't cost this, are found materials constructed to create a seed bed that is shaded and also protected, obviously, from our potential pests or chickens or children. And then these plants can be transplanted when we're ready. And obviously the objective here is, especially with seeds that we've bought, we want to get the maximum value from those. We want to keep a very close eye on them and make sure we minimize any losses. So the first step of the process is germinating the seeds. That's a high maintenance kind of thing. And then very quickly, we're going to transplant those. We might be germinating some seeds in situ. Here's Deborah again, with some beautifully designed raised beds. We can see that there's lots of straw, there's mulch covering the ground to protect it. And we can see the beds are quite narrow, so it's easy to reach. So we can do all of our gardening without standing on the soil. We've removed the topsoil from here and built it up. So we've got better growing conditions, optimize growing conditions. And look, it looks like there's our germination area over there, closer to the house. And now as we move further away from the settlement, here are established gardens. And look, we've got a mixture of different crops on here. We can see there's a banana tree in a nicely mulched pit here. And we've got some others offering a bit of shade and exploring the synergy, the relationships between these elements. So we're going to design our garden around the gardener. Who is the gardener? Is it Deborah? Is it me? Is it Andre? Is it going to be someone else? So your raised beds don't have to look like this. They just need to fulfill that same function. So Deborah has designed and constructed these because it's suiting her needs, and she's using herself as a measurement, if you like, and it's located, optimizing for herself. So let's think about how, if we're designing for other people, how we need to understand their needs, we need to understand their priorities and how they're going to use them. So this is a simple raised bed system. There's no built up sides to it. It's just mounded. Quite often we call this ridge and furrow system. And obviously, clearly, when it rains, those furrows are going to fill up with rainwater, and that water is going to sit and percolate in. And if the moisture is down deep, that will stimulate the roots of the plants to grow deep down to access that water. And I can imagine that as Deborah is evolving the system and interacting with it, she's learning constantly how to fine tune to make it work as best that it can, and to observe if you keep feeding it and keep adding the compost and the mulch to see how the soil develops. So here's a completely different one. It's a group of guys in Rwanda, and they've decided to make a sort of a mandala garden, a circular bed. He's made this one, I think he told me these are 1 meter 20 wide, and you can reach about 60 centimeters before you need to kind of fall over, before you need to put your foot out. And these beds are designed so you don't have to stand on them, retaining topsoil, retaining moisture, and creating the opportunity to keep adding to it. This is a community garden in Rwanda, and I think that it's been designed to create a visual impact, to make people notice it because it looks different. So, but let's just be clear, both of these raised bed systems perform exactly the same function, and we're doing it for the same reason. And that the one looks like that because Deborah's designed it to suit her requirements, and this one looks like this because Barnaby has designed this to suit a different set of requirements in a different place. So your permaculture design will look different from mine because it's an expression of your creativity with the materials you have to suit the end outputs that you require, the functions that you require. There's many layers to this. Now, I've told you permaculture's a journey, a long, long journey. It doesn't have to be so long, but it is. And we've also said there's no upper limit to productivity. So whatever you're seeing, we can do better than that. What you're looking at is exactly the same thing. It's a raised bed system designed using locally available resources to suit a design specification of a particular place. So this is a community garden space in Newtown in Wales. It was designed and developed by myself and other people. And we made our raised beds to look like that because it's a public visitor center, because there was a sawmill on the other side of the road, and it was easy for us to access. This is Welsh larch. This is a wood that doesn't rot. you can build raised beds out of it in the last 10 or 15 years. So, and we wanted to make something that looked very tidy because it's in a formal setting. It's actually between a college and a theatre. So where the public might come, and we had a slightly different set of objectives to what Barnaby had in that picture and what Deborah had in that one. But I'll say it again, it's exactly the same thing. It's performing the same function. These beds are 1.2 meters wide. I can reach across them. This one is 2.4 meters long, but 1.2 meters across. So we can still always work them and not have to stand on and compact the soil. Every year we feed more mulch and compost into the top, and every year the soil in the bed develops and becomes more healthy. Look at these. I'm not quite sure what we've got. Those look like beans or peas that we're growing there with onions growing in front of them. Obviously we've got some polythene growing tunnels there, which are very crucial in our climate because it's a lot colder. And yeah, so the form follows function. So we're growing plants, but we're doing it because they look different because we've got different materials and different designers and different priorities. So you can make raised beds with nice wooden sides, but it's not a requirement. And in fact, they can harbor pests. You can get a buildup of things like slugs around the edges. So, everything is a balancing act. But what we're interested in is creating the right growing conditions for plants. That's our priority. Here's a raised bed system from Kayaka to refugee settlement. It's looked like it's made from polypropylene sacks, and it's a kind of a keyhole, I guess, almost. We've got a compost heap in the middle, and it's built using the materials that were available to those people at that time. So all of these are the same thing, but they're made by different designers to fit different specifications and different priorities. So, and what we do say again very clearly is form follows function. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Does it do the job that it's supposed to do? Is it creating improved, optimized conditions for growing plants? That's all we're doing. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Does it do the job it's intended for? And I love the diversity of how people take ideas and adapt them and morph them to fit their individual requirements. So, with this garden, I wanted to impress people, and maybe local politicians or education advisors might come. They need to see something that's kind of ordered and tidy. But in your own garden, you're just doing it for yourself. You're growing it for your own needs and to meet your own, according to your own priorities. So they are all equally as valid, and they've come about, say, just because of slightly different priorities. So I think that's really interesting as a start point, and think about how we're now moving from building our team and informing the people around us, actually having a really good survey, asking the questions, drawing maps and diagrams, sharing ideas, beginning to have a real sense of place of our site, orientation, where's up, where's down, what happens when it's really hot, what happens when it's cool, where does the rain come, where does it go, where do the elephants come from, where does the fire come from? These are things you need to think about. And slowly, starting right by the house, there it is, we're going to start off the process by sprouting some seeds. Now, Andre, you might not have any money. You might not be able to afford to go and buy those seeds. Are there seeds of plants that we can find from the wild? Are there varieties? And they might not have to be food plants. We might start off with soil building plants because we might need to create the conditions that's growing. seeds are expensive. So if you're going to go buy them and they die, is your whole project's going to stop. So this precursor steps before we just go and plant is we need to get ready. We need to have a plan. We need to have a design and have thought about these different functions. So and again, is if we're going to make the investment of our raised beds, let's get them in the right place. Let's think about access, pathways, quality of soil, light, all of those things are relevant. Here's a sack garden. Here's a lovely, again, a variation on a theme. How much space do we have? What resources do we have lying around? Can we combine those elements in a way which optimize the conditions for growing plants? So here's a lovely three-dimensional growing system, like a tower, again, made in a polypropylene sack with holes cut in it. We can create a channel down the middle so that water, if we add water in, it infiltrates right to the bottom. And suddenly we've created a space that didn't exist. We've done vertical stacking. We've gone up, and look, there's an opportunity there. Something about sack gardens, which is kind of a fun thing, but it looks different. So people see it and go, "Oh wow, what's that?" And that might be part of your design. Is I want to trigger people's interest. I want to do things in a way in which people go, "Oh goodness, I haven't seen that before." Or what's going on here? Maybe that, that's, again, it's this demonstrate, educate, replicate. You're demonstrating techniques. Well, I've never seen a bed like that or a growing system like that. And then there's the basis for your conversation. There's the basis for your interaction. So see how every element in your design furthers the overarching process. We're doing things in interesting ways because we want to engage people. The more interesting and experimental it is, the more we will excite people's curiosity. But we want to do things that work, and we want to be strategic in how we go about it. Mulching. One of the rules in permaculture is we don't want to see bare soil. In nature, in a natural system, it's very rare that you would see the soil. It's always covered in plants, either living plants or maybe dead plants. Maybe in the dry season, when things die back in our winter, we can protect the soils by putting dead plants onto the surface. We call it mulching. It's going to reduce evaporation. That organic matter is going to slowly break down, and it's going to be food for soil microbes. Look how we've excavated a swale here. So a strategy to trap rainwater, and we've built the ditch and a bank, but we want to protect that soil. So we're covering it with a layer of mulch. And in the process of doing it, we've inspired and involved this young person who's now experiencing this for the first time. And of course, once you explain what you're doing and why you're doing it, it makes sense. And it's a way of drawing in people to come and interact with you. So all of our techniques might look slightly different, but actually there's a common logic throughout it all. And I think this is how we build our projects. And don't forget, your long-term goal is to create the ideal conditions for the life in the soil, in your landscape interactions. That's what you're trying to do. And to have the ideal conditions for life in the soil, you need moisture, air, and you need to protect your soil from damage. That means digging and turning it as little as you possibly can. not standing on it, not compacting it, not using machines, not using chemicals. So next thing we might want to begin thinking about is no monocultures. Nature never does this. Nature never grows one plant. They're always jumbled up together. And often the presence of one plant actually helps and supports another. These are mutually beneficial relationships, symbiosis. And here we're looking at maize underplanted with beans. Start the maize off first. And once it starts getting its head up, we can plant the beans. And then the beans have the maize plant to climb up, to have a structure. The beans build relationship with soil bacteria and fix nitrogen into the soil. Maize is a heavy feeder of a plant. It has a lot of biomass to produce. And by growing it with the beans, we create much more ideal conditions for the maize. And look, there's no bare soil. We're not seeing the gaps between the maize plants now because we filled that with beans. And because beans are climbers, beans will head off wherever there is light, they'll find their way. They'll find their way through it. Also, I think that I'm interested just looking at this picture. We're seeing trees left in the landscape. We're seeing maize and beans growing on around the edge of wooded areas. The more I see a mixture of different plants, the happier I am to see that. We want to see what we call a polyculture, many different species working together. So here's our first step. We're starting. That we had bare soil a little while ago, so we're moving forward. We've got the soil. First we cover it with mulch, then we cover it with living plants, and then we think about, well, what other companion plants could we add into this? Maybe there's other. We don't just have to stop with the maize and the beans. Of course, famously, we have the Three Sisters plant guild, which is maize, beans, and squash or pumpkin. The beans can climb up the stalks of the maize, and the pumpkin can spread out and cover the ground and also find the light and protect the soil from the sun, protect the soil from drying out and being damaged by the sun. And especially as we go closer to the equator, as we go into the tropics, and that sun is ferocious and it's very hot. We want to protect our soils as much as we can, and we can do that by learning how to combine plants together. And look, I'm trying to show this as a sequence to see how we're working with simple techniques, step by step, and learning as we do it, as we move forward into it. Gerald, it's coming up to 6:30, so we've got just over another hour left. Should we perhaps have a short break? Just give everybody 3 or 4 minutes to stretch your legs. And
let's do 8 minutes. So we're back
okay.
at 1:30.
Okay, everyone, if you want to just take
I think Stella is saying she's with Clovis.
Oh, okay. Clovis is there.
Hi, Stella. Hi, Clovis. Okay, we can do a bit of a stretch and be back at in exactly 8 minutes. So that is 30 minutes past the hour.
Okay, and then we'll come back for the final hour.
Absolutely. See
Thank
you.
Yes, Tim. Hi.
Hey, Clovis, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Steve, how are you?
Good. Yeah, we're good. Nice to hear from you this morning as well.
Yeah, thanks.
How are your studies progressing?
Yeah, we are doing great, and we are looking forward to have the end examination
Yeah.
this second week of May.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it will be for 1 week or 2 weeks until the timetable is out.
Well, good luck with that. And are you enjoying the course?
Yes, I do.
It looks really interesting. So, you know,
Yeah.
Andre, let me introduce our colleague here, Clovis.
Yes, yes.
He's
Hello.
also coming from Congo originally.
Okay.
Mr. Clovis, how are you?
I'm fine.
Yes, I'm Andre Lutula I'm from Kakuma refugee camp, but I'm
Wow.
Congolese.
This is Andre. You are in Kakuma. That is Kenya, right?
Yes. Yes, Kenya. Yeah, but I'm Congolese by nationality.
Wow,
I'm
that
from
is great.
Congo.
Eh? Wow.
Yeah, nice to meet you, bro.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe
And,
I can put my video on a bit.
sure. So, yeah, Andre wants to initiate a permaculture group there at Kakuma. And I think that's a very worthy project.
Yes. And
Hello?
I can say, Brother Steve, for all that you came to talk in the group, it is very interested, and I think I will do it with my members and my communities.
But I think I think what we need to do is to find ways which we can stay in contact with each other. And then, because very much in our academy, we want to be able to, you know, to see the process that you go through and to learn from that and to allow other people to learn from that. That's our method.
Yeah.
So I think you can see. Can you see me?
I see you. Oh, you just been but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to make sure that you can see me even if you are far away. Maybe the network.
Yeah.
Yes, Gerard, how are you? I can see Gerard. I've seen Stella as well. Yeah.
Yes,
Deborah.
Clovis, how are you?
It's a long time. Eh?
It's been a long time. Hoping everything is all right. How are books? How is education?
Yes. Yeah, we are pushing. We are pushing much joy. Yeah, much joy,
Okay.
and then we're just progressing.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Well done, well done. We are already
Yes.
seeing your updates and the work you're doing. Well done. And please keep doing it.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, we currently we had 10 days of FFS, which is fast field school, and then a little part of business. Since I've joined AFC Foundation, Uganda,
Okay.
and to support refugee in the settlement. And then actually most of the tool they are using, PRR tools, are related with what we are designing. Really, the vision, even the goal, everything. It is. I've seen that 639. So really, we are enjoying. And then I think only there is some change which we support to bring. Not now, as we are on that stage of designing. Maybe the way for us we are doing campaign and then printing, the way we are following, for example, the calendar, the way we are design in terms of like biodiversity. So I think there is that which need to be addressed, whereby I cannot address it now since we are still looking on their tool, the way it looks like. Then as we implement, then from there, so that we can reach on these results. this is the approach I think that's up to you, since it is a project which is, we have a lot of bureaucracy, and then we have to follow all the steps which are there. In Port Local, we can keep support each other hand in hand. But everything they're doing is just RC work. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Clovis. Good to see that, you know, you're
Yeah.
broadening your wings and you're, you know, spreading far and wide and
Yeah.
impacting or, you know, creating change.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
All right,
you.
we'll catch up. We'll catch up. Let's have a cup of tea and then, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, as you say, Gerald, it's great to see the progress and to, you know, to remain in touch. So yes, nice greetings to Clovis. Thank you, Deborah and Stella. Yes, and from when we met in 2018, I think we met Clovis, and then to see that journey that he's been on. And I think this is why we're creating our Academy of Permaculture, is so that we can, permaculture doesn't end, it begins with the PDC, and it's that journey that we're on that we want. I think we all want to, we can all learn from and be inspired from, but also we can share that with other people, so that, you know, we can create pathways forward for other people as well. There's so much kind of need for this. There's so much demand for this. I think that I can't imagine being a refugee, how challenging that must be to have to, you know, leave your home and, you know, reinvent your life. But I think sadly that's something that's going to become much more common, much more frequent, because of conflict, resource wars and things, but also more importantly because of a changing climate, changing conditions, and that's going to change the shape of the economy. And we don't know. We're all having to deal with quite fundamental change, and I think permaculture again is something that helps us think about that and approach that. and to sort of link back to my presentation, is building food growing systems around us that also help us build community, I think is essential. I think that's what we're trying to do. And we want our food growing systems to be functional and productive, but we also want to do it in a way in which we utilize as much as we can local resources, and we over time build fertility and build soil. That's our objective. So we begin to think about some of the stepping stones, how we might approach our growing. And we talked about companion planting, beneficial relationships between plants, plant guilds, and then the idea of, well, how many different species of plant could we fit together in a guild? And there's just a whole journey of exploration in front of us to find out the answers to these questions. And of course, for each one of us, we might come up with a slightly different answer. And then again, that is the sort of diversity of experience that we want to capture and share and learn from in our Academy of Permaculture. So as we start in growing perhaps some annual plants and vegetables, things that are going to give us quite a quick return, let's also start looking around and see what other plants are out there that we can start saving seed from, and propagating and promoting those plants which we know are going to be useful for us. Now, when we see plants like this, of this family, they have often this kind of leaf patterning, and they also quite often have seed pods that look a bit like peas and beans. And this we're looking at, even without knowing the name of the plant or anything about it, I can look at that plant and I can say, that is a leguminous tree. That is a plant that has the ability to fix nitrogen in the soil. That this plant, even if I can't eat it, even if I can't use it, I'm going to grow it because it's going to build the fertility in my soil. There are versions of these. You'll see these leaf shape, and also you can learn to see the flowers. And these seed pods are always the same. There's a certain pattern you can recognize, and you will see plants from this family, the acacia family, mimosa family, growing around you, and you can take those seeds and propagate them. Or if you are out visiting somewhere, or again, this might be ways which we can support each other, is by collecting seeds and saving them and swapping them and making them available. And actually, this family of trees, this is the Lucina family, it fixes nitrogen. It grows very, very quickly. We can harvest it repeatedly and it will regrow if we create the right conditions. These leaves and seeds, they have multiple uses. They can be fed to animals, they can be fed to chickens. We can use them for mulching. As soon as we're in production, as soon as we start our growing systems going, we're going to create materials which we can use to extend and build the system, which we say chop and drop. Look, if that tree starting to shade out the plants that your food plants, you could pull those leaves off, throw them on the ground as mulch. You could grow the materials you need where you're going to use them, and then continuously interact with that plant to promote and develop your growing system. We've mentioned Caliandra. There's other plants we can use for living fences as well. So let's think about, into our growing system, we want to build diversity. We want lots of different species, and those species could be doing different functions for us. So this living fence here is feeding the soil microbes. It's creating biomass. We can pick at it and use it for mulching, for building and extending our growing systems. So think about every element that we bring into our system can also contribute to the overall health of the system and give us the resources to extend it. So that's why I'm saying start small. Conserve every little bit of organic matter that you grow, because you're going to need it to mulch your soils, to start off your compost heaps, to set in motion the processes that we want to have. And we're not going to just focus on the food plants. We're going to understand that we're growing other kinds of plants for other kinds of reasons, and that they all in some way are mutually beneficial. They support the long-term success of the system that we're building. And by having a sense, we've done our sector planning, we know where our pathways, our access points, we thought about wildlife, we've thought about stray farm animals. We can now create pathways through our landscape that channel people or channel animals away from where they can't cause any damage, and we can even provide them with food and things to encourage them on their way as they're grazing. So we strategically adding elements that support our functions, and each one of these elements has in itself multiple functions. I put in just this extra slide to make the point: plants with multiple uses. Remember, we did a presentation about the moringa tree, Moringa oleifera. It has so many uses. Did I do the next slide? I can't remember. No. It has so many uses. Its leaves are packed full of protein. It has medicinal uses. You can use the timber. You can use the seed pods. The seeds, it very readily, rapidly reaches a stage where you can then propagate from your original trees. Remember, it is another nitrogen fixing plant. And also remember that we actually saw in one of the slides examples of them using moringa as a green manure, literally sowing it as an annual crop and then digging it back in before it actually reaches the tree step. So growing plants that build soil, finding elements that help us extend the system and actually have high value uses. You can collect and dry the leaves of moringa. You can add them into your own food to extend your nutrition, or you could bring them into the food of your animals, and the quality of the meat, the quality of the milk will go up because the nutrition of the moringa tree boosts the nutrition of the animal. So it's a plant that builds soil, provides shade, provides refuge, supports wildlife, that feeds you and gives you high value yields. Okay, let's think about how we could not create a monoculture of any of these things, but we're going to weave these elements together in a way in which it supports these long-term functions that we have in mind. We've talked about swales, we've talked about water catchment, about a whole range of strategies that we might have to hold rainwater on your land, to get it to soak into the soil where you want it to go. If we've encouraged water to soak in a particular place, then we're going to create a microclimate. Look, here we can imagine how the water might fill the swale and then slowly ooze its way into the ground. So now we've created slightly different conditions on the lower slope. We can plant into that and exploit that extra bit of humidity. And look how it's now shaded. So we've got slightly less evaporation. In this example, they've created a hugel cultured swale. That means they've buried rotten wood under the soil, which will again act like a sponge, hold onto moisture, and create a slightly different set of conditions. In this example, we have fruit trees, nut trees, berries. We have clover, so nitrogen fixing plants, comfrey as another accumulator of minerals, and then we can start adding in other productive plants as well. But our swale's primary function is to catch rainwater and encourage it to infiltrate into the ground. But once we do that, we create our own microclimate, and maybe and opportunities of different kinds of biodiversity. I had this lovely picture of a toad someone had drawn, and just reminded me of that. We're going to create slightly different conditions, which is going to favor slightly different elements, which are going to come into our system and help regulate pests, help regulate insect populations. You want amphibians in your productive systems because they're going to be very much on the regulation of pests and predators team. We've touched on vetiver, another plant with multiple uses, a deep-rooted plant that we can plant strategically to have a swale effect, a water catchment effect. It increases infiltration of water into the soil as well, and it's also another part of the yield. Another nice picture from Deborah of climbing plants. Here we've got passion fruits are growing on a trellis. I'm not sure if this is coming out underplanted under other trees. So start to think about adding layers of productivity into your space, how having climbing plants can have a really good shading effect, cooling the lower layers. And keep thinking about how we can combine these elements together to create the conditions that favor soil building, favor the plants, and actually create a range of different conditions so that we get more biodiversity, and therefore our system becomes more stable. These are the things that we're holding in mind all the time as we're developing our permaculture productive space. It's another picture. I think it's from Ramadan Mutebi, and I think this is again breaking up blocks of crops with diversity corridors. It looks like, I don't know if we've got some clovers and nitrogen fixing plants, and then also breaks to reduce spread of pests, and these can be very powerful techniques. So we're always trying to move away from having a field of a single type of plant. We want diversity. Now, compost. As we are establishing a garden in a place that has not been ongoing growing in it, there's going to be a need to rebuild the life in the soil. And that is ultimately why we make compost. You might think of it as nutrients, you might think of it as you're adding kind of goodness or whatever into the soil, but it's sort of wrong. Don't think of it like fertilizer, like you're fertilizing the ground. What you're doing when you add compost is you're adding soil life back to the soil. And when you make a compost heap, whether it's in a container like this, or it can be, obviously, again, you're going to make your compost heap out of the materials that you have to hand. It can just be a pile, but the rule is you need to be a meter cubed to really compost. It needs to be of a certain size. And this is a domestic composter that I have at home, and I'm very aware of the kinds of refuse, of rubbish that comes through the home, and anything that we deem is worthy goes into the composter, and we mix. So we try and make a very high carbon compost. We get a lot of paper waste and cardboard waste here, but you can see I've got a few weeds in, and I might put some, if I have food waste, vegetable peelings, that goes in as well. And I'm very conscious of the quality of the compost that comes out, and you can see the compost worms in there as well, which are always a good sign. Now, the rules, I do a lot of observation. I'm very interested to see how, look, it's just bits of card and bits of food waste and plant matter, but I have removed all the plastic. I have made, in fact, you can't really try too hard. You need to pull out as much plastic as possible. Otherwise, it just gets in the way of the process. It doesn't contribute anything. Another thing that we've learned is if you have paper waste and things, it's good to scrunch it up so that there's air trapped inside. Otherwise, like this book here, it's kind of squashed, and when it's compressed, it means there's no air, which means the microbes can't get in there. We're trying to promote the oxygen breathing, air breathing compost, microbes just like ourselves. Instead, because this hasn't biodegraded one way, instead the population of wood lice have moved in, and these are little insects that like to eat cellulose. They like to eat woody waste, and here they're enjoying this looks like a publication of some kind, and you can see their droppings all over it, and they are really wonderful soil building creatures. So as you do your composting, get to learn the names of, or the habits of, the conditions that certain organisms like, because they're doing the work for you. Remember, we were inspired this week by Masanobu Fukuoka, who took him 25 years, but he got to the do nothing kind of farming. So do nothing farming means getting the nature to do the work for you, created the right conditions, and these woodlice now are breaking down this matter and releasing it back to the garden again. Observation, just what materials are around, what strategies can I use to break them down, what are my friends and colleagues and allies in terms of other species, and then let's be aware of the quality of the final material. And we're going to do that by smelling it. And your compost, when you make it, it should never taste sour. It should never smell like vinegar or sulfur or rotten eggs, or it should always just smell either earthy or of nothing. As soon as you get those unpleasant smells, it means it's gone anaerobic. It means there's not enough oxygen. It's too wet. You need to add more of the carbon, the woody type waste. Greetings to you, Ali. We're just going through a sequence. I'm going to run back right to the beginning because I started off with you in the picture. So our theme today is small and slow solutions. And I was trying to give a layout, like a sequence to think about initiating a land-based project. And I started off by saying, we can use our permaculture ideas, we can have meetings, we can inform people of our intentions, and we can use a sort of permaculture language to help people understand what it is that we're doing and to feel part of that. And so we'd love to hear a little bit in a few minutes from you about how you've done that at Butambala. How have you managed to recruit people to your idea and to your vision? We have Andre here, Ali, who's at Kakuma in Kenya, and he's very interested. He wants to start a permaculture initiative there. So we're thinking about how we start these processes off, and there's an element of explaining, of showing people, perhaps by having little meetings and discussions, or of actually getting out and measuring and surveying the land as our A-frame, and then also drawing pictures and designs and recruiting people in to help them see and share your vision. And I just wanted to come back and show these pictures because I know I pinched them from you. I think it was just your last year's PDC. Anyway, so thanks for that, Ali. And then we've gone on to think about the sequence of events, establishment, and different strategies that we might employ. And here we are now, embracing biodiversity and talking about compost. I'll come to the end of this because we'll have time to have a chat at the beginning. But one of the reasons that I'm going to stress it again is you're making compost because you're multiplying the beneficial microbes and then you're reintroducing them to the soil. It is those beneficial microbes and mycelium and bacteria, all these different things that make the minerals available to the plant. So I'm going to expand on that point. So, and we touched on this earlier on about how plant roots, especially longer term plants, also annual plants too, offer up points for fungi to latch onto their roots. And in fact, the fungi, the mycorrhizal fungi, expand the surface area of the plant's roots by many thousands of times. They connect plants together and they allow them to communicate with each other. But more importantly, the plant also pushes out nutrients, sugars into the soil, which feed fungi and then these other beneficial organisms. And in return for the sugars the trees putting out, these microbes make minerals available to the plants. So the actual process of fertility, the process of exchange of minerals in the soil is facilitated by bacteria and fungi and the things that predate on that. Okay, and that is what fertility is. It's the interaction between all these little things. It's not a fertilizer. And remember what Fukuoka said in that quote I had at the beginning, which was that the reason we think we need all these techniques is because we've damaged the land. It's because the harmony, the balance of that land has been damaged by our interactions. And actually, as permaculturalists, we're trying to restore that balance to the land. So the amount of work that we need to do goes constantly down because the system is becoming more and more able to look after itself. And that's why Fukuoka says, you know, ultimately, eventually, you don't need to make compost. You don't need to prune the trees. Everything starts to find its own harmony. But we have to restore that because we're nearly always working in systems that have been highly damaged by farming and by other kind of invasive practices. So this is what we're trying to achieve. This is why we compost, is because we're favoring the life in the soil. Biochar. We talked about biochar. Biochar is material that has once grown, biomass. It's been pyrolyzed. It's been cooked, heated up in the absence of oxygen, driving off of flammable wood gases, which then can be combusted and used usefully. And the material left behind is biochar. And it's the same material as charcoal, but charcoal is usually made with the idea of using as a fuel for cooking and so forth. Whereas biochar is used as a soil amendment. So it doesn't matter if it's crushed down to a powder. In fact, that's a good thing. And we introduce it into the soil because it favors the soil life. It creates habitat for these very same kinds of microbes, that we were just talking about. So another part of our strategy to favor the life in the soil. And when we favor the life in the soil, we're not digging. We're minimizing our interference. We're allowing a mix of different kinds of plants to exist over a longer periods of time. So some of those plants are going to form long-term, deep associations with mycorrhizal fungi. Those mycorrhizal fungi are going to actually fuse the roots of one plant with the roots of another plant. They can trade water, sugars, nutrients, hormones, antibodies. The whole garden starts to become a single interconnected system. We're reminded here there are different kinds of fungi. There's type that will break down dead matter, what we call a saprophyte. So a lot of fungi break down dead matter, but there are another whole kinds of fungi that actually live in a partnership with the tree, and they'll only occur in partnership with that tree, and many, many, many more. But the longer we allow our systems to establish and we don't interfere with them with poisons and with digging, then the more these complex fungal root associations can form, and the stronger our ecosystem becomes. And now plants can access water and nutrients that are much, much deeper and beyond their own root systems. This is the slides we had a little look at last week from Tesfahun in Ethiopia. He's talking about his syntropic agroforestry. And what he's done is he's come to, this is a monoculture of moringa trees. And he's now coming back and he's adding the diversity. He's shaped the size of the ground. We talked about here, they were composting donkey droppings and grasses. They've had wood ash, they had mulch, and then a series of techniques. They did chop and drop off the trees themselves. whole series of strategies to cover and protect the soil and to favor the conditions that feature the soil biota, the life in the soil. And in doing that, the whole system becomes stronger. These are our lessons. And remember when we had this diagram in an earlier session where Bill Mollison encouraged us to think about the many interconnections between elements in a living system. And we were reminded how each one of these elements in some ways contributes to the overall health of the system. So that's what it's starting to look like. This is what we're trying to do, is to rebuild those connections. So again, another thought about guilds, stacking plants together, how that might work. And all of which is about, all of this diversity and valuing these different elements is about ultimately integrated pest management. And again, in the Fukuoka book, he talks about how he doesn't have pests. In fact, he has a predomination of predators on his land, of the predator species. These greenfly, these sap-sucking aphids will always gravitate towards the weaker plants. And there are other insects that just love to eat them. So what we want to do is, rather than seeing that, oh, that pest attack is telling us we've got weak plants and that we also don't have enough predator species. That's the feedback. It's not saying, oh, greenfly by poison. It's saying, oh, your plants are not very strong. They're susceptible to pest attack and you don't have enough predator species. What kinds of other insects or birds, whatever, eat aphids? That's our question. Part of the IPM process as well is know your enemy, understand how they work. And there's a very interesting thing about, so these are homopterans, sap-sucking aphids. So they're young babies, obviously, and the nymphs are laid, the eggs are laid on the plant, and then they'll start to suck the sap of the plant. An interesting thing that we learned from studying and trying to get to know our potential pest species is that they can't handle the sugar. It's too much for them, and they have this strange gut which is folded back on itself. So I think the food comes in and goes round and goes wiggly, 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 and then goes out and passes out of the aphid. And you can see here, this mid-gut section, it filters, it feeds back on itself. So what happens is the insect cannot digest all that sugar. It swallows the sap, and then the sugar immediately passes out and leaves the insect, whereas the non-sappy, the non-sugars are then fully digested. So even this annoying pest actually has to protect itself from the sap of the plant. And the healthier the plant is, the more dense the sap is, and it becomes harder and harder for the insect to actually digest it. And once your plant is healthy to the point that its sap is more condensed, more nutrient dense, it will kill the insect. And this is the lesson that we're learning, is pests do not attack healthy plants. And to have healthy plants, we need a healthy soil. And to have a healthy soil, we need to energize the soil microbiome. We need to get all those little insects and we need to energize the whole of the soil food web. This is our learning. Here, as much as I'm talking about this diversity, and obviously there's layering, we've got herbaceous plants, we've got trees, is let's look at the patterns, the natural patterns of a tropical forest system. And tropical forest systems, especially that way you guys are in Uganda, sun comes overhead, there's a lot of direct sunlight, 12 hours every day. Plants can cope with being grown quite close together. And look how they exploit the different layers within the forest. We have a sort of canopy layer, trees of a certain height, maybe 20, 30 meters. But then there's always those other ones that just pop out the top. So we have an emergent layer. And then there's an understory layer that the trees will happily sit under the canopy. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens on the forest floor. Plus we can grow vines up through it and climbers and yams and things like that. So I'm showing this slide because I'm reminding you to say this idea of maybe there's no upper limit to productivity. Maybe we can always stack another element into our system, especially when we're thinking in 3 dimensions. This is a nicer picture with a more diverse mix of plants on the forest floor, understory layer and so forth, and start to think about how we might be able to layer in more productivity and think about the extra utility of shading, of the mulching, the leaves and the nutrient cycling that's going on around this. Think about how much sugar is getting pumped to the soil by these trees. Think about how energized that mycorrhizal fungal layer is going to be and all of the other elements in that system. So we actually want to keep these. It might take quite a few years to get to a complex system like that, but that's what you want to have in mind. So even right back at the beginning of our whole process, here we are with our bare soil. We're starting off bare soil, it's dead. We've dug it, we've moved it, we've disturbed it. We're starting at the beginning. We're going to have to feed that soil. We're going to have to protect that soil. We're going to have to grow plants in it that help build the soil, feed the soil microbes. We're going to have to make compost, do all of those things. But once we get to this stage, you can imagine an evolved system starts to look like that. That's what Fukuoka was talking about. We don't need, all we need to do is to harvest, maybe simplistically, but, and I don't know if Nicholas is still with us. So we've lost you, Nicholas. That's a shame. These are photos from Nicholas Orwer in Kenya. There's the idea, there's the picture. And this is how far Nicholas has got so far. Here's his food forest system. And look, we've got an interesting mix of plants. I'm seeing terracing. He thought about catching and storing energy, soil building, slowing down the flow of water, preventing erosion. We've got annual plants planted in beds there. And then we've got, it looks like eucalyptus, we've got bananas and more bananas. I don't know what we've got here. Is that lemongrass or something? We've got pumpkin. A really nice evolving mix of different plants and different strategies combining together to create something that starts to be patterned. Looks a little bit like that. It's a little bit like natural systems. Okay, we can keep adding. Where do we go next? What can we do next? How do we boost that soil life and how that's fertility further? There's no upper limit to what we can create. Here's a lovely picture, enjoying the papayas. And again, just getting a sense of the profusion of different materials here. Look how we're not seeing any bare soil. It's covered with lots of live plants and dead plants. And we're seeing lots of stacking and vertical layers. So lots of shading and there's going to be a lot of soil building going on in that too. So, yep. That was a slide from Paul, propagating fruit trees. And again, all the skills that go on within that. And just think about, as you're developing and extending your food growing systems, how you can recruit people in to take part in routine activities, to learn new skills like tree propagation, like all of the other elements of what we're doing here. And I'm only skating across this. Just think about how many more things you might be able to, just keep introducing, keep playing with in terms of ideas. Now, I'm gonna focus now, just the last few slides are, let's get back to this. We know that as our plants grow, they can photosynthesize, they can create sugars, and that sugar's going down into the roots, going down to the shoots. There's the dead plants, there's the sugars coming off it. All of this waste, residue, metabolites, and plants creates then habitat opportunities for root-feeding nematodes, fungi, mycorrhizal and saprophytic fungi, and for bacteria, soil bacteria, that are the beginning part of that whole chain of fertility. Everybody likes to eat bacteria. Protozoa love to eat them, and nematodes like to eat them. Little arthropods that like to eat them. They also feast off on the fungi. Think about how the interaction of all of these species is now making nutrients available back to the plants. The plants are going to eat whatever the metabolism produces from all of these species. So we've got bigger insects, arthropods, larger worms, feeding on the smaller ones, birds and income other animals and mammals. All of this now becomes the nutrient cycle that feeds the plants. And so the more we extend our food web, the healthier these plants become. So here's the thing. And should we need to know to get them to look at doing right thing. Oh yeah. Sorry. The interaction between all of these things is that's your fertility. You're looking at it. And if you've got a microscope, you can literally see it. This is soil bacteria and other strange organisms which we can become familiar with if you want to. And the one way to know you've got really healthy soil is you literally look at it, and you can see what's there and see how the presence of these organisms is showing you. Yeah, there you go. That's your fertility. You can see it. Now you might not have a big microscope and the skill to use it. But what I'm going to introduce to you is this tool, and it is a refractometer. And I have shown, some of you might have seen it. It's a very, very simple tool, which if we are growing healthy plants, what this does is allows us to here's the thing. Healthy soil makes for healthy plants. And by healthy soil, we mean soil that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trophic layers of soil life. And when we get to that stage, we know we have healthy soil. One way we can tell is by looking at the soil, but another way we can tell is by looking at the plant. And so if the plant remember, the plants are only making sugars. Everything else it's getting, all the minerals are coming from the soil through its ability to build relationships with that soil life. The more effectively it does that, the more nutrient dense the plant becomes. And we can measure that nutrient density by squeezing the leaves of the plant until the sap comes out. So not the matter, not the fibers, but the liquid part. And we place a drop of that liquid on this slide, on it's just a little optical viewer. It's like a little telescope kind of thing. And we put a drop of the plant sap on the slide, and we look down the end. We just need natural light. There's no electricity needed, no batteries. And when we look down this this tube, we see this. We see something that says bricks percent 0 to 30, something like that. And if we put a drop of water on the slide, what happens is that when we shine the light onto it, the light shines straight through the water. So the light doesn't bend. So when we first look in our test our meter, we put water on it and we look, and this blue line would be at 0. And that's telling us that we're looking at water. So as we put the sap of the plant onto the lens, the more dense it is, the more syrupy it is, the more sugar it's got in it, the more minerals and vitamins it's got in it, the more it bends the light, it refracts the light. And what we're beginning to learn, and this is what we're going to invite our members to participate in going forward, is the higher the percentage, the bricks value, the higher the percentage of sugar in the leaves of your plant, the harder it is for a pest to attack it. And that's why I was explaining about these aphids, that the insects are already having to deal with the fact that the plant sap is too strong for them. And it gets to a point where they literally can't deal with it and they die. And somewhere between 12 and 15% of sugar content in the leaves, your plants become increasingly impregnable to pest attack. As you develop your soil food web and your mycorrhizal web, your plants become increasingly resistant to drought, because they're not just living off their roots are connected to this huge network of mycelial pathways. Stronger, healthy soil gives stronger, healthy plants. Stronger, healthy plants can resist pest attack, and they become increasingly drought tolerant. This is what we're aiming for. And I want to invite you to consider being field researchers for the Griffin Network. Now, these tools do cost some money. We need to do some fundraising or they need to do some fundraising, but if we can get some sent out, what the research is saying is they want to know, actually they want to create a data set, as much information as we can about variations in conditions. So someone gets, if you notice perhaps a very low score or a very high score, is we want to know about it. And what is it that you're doing? Can we learn from something? Are you doing something really wrong or something really right? Both of those are learning opportunities. You might be able to do surveying around in your neighborhood. You can literally see the quality of the plants that you and your neighbors are growing and measure it and give that measurement an actual number. It's fascinating. And I've been doing this for the last couple of years on my garden. I'm developing a food growing garden on a local farm. I started it 2 years ago, and I've been measuring, well, every now and again, and I keep records, so I can actually see the progress in the soil quality. And I think the more we keep data, the more we make measurements, the more we have an awareness of what we're doing, then that is obviously, that's hugely valuable, important, and yeah, everything else. There we go. I'm going to jump out of that because I realize we've only got about 15 minutes left. Ali, we'd love to hear from you. Put me wrong, correct me anything I said wrong about Butambala, and I used a couple of your photos. So do give us a bit more depth, and how's it all going there?
Is Ali there?
He didn't reply. Let's hear from you. Somebody want to? Oh, yeah, look, he's gone. We scared him off. Any closing thoughts from the floor?
I think you highlight everything, and then the balance for the microorganism, where you discuss about the mycorrhizae, fungi, and then the way how they have the bigger interaction with the nutrients. And then what I've discovered so far since when I was just making kind of research and understanding the soil science, I realized that more than we are feeding our soil, and then more than we are building our ecosystem as well, and then it can end up having that more the strength, or can call it the capability to sustain even when the dry season or even the climate change keep just happening in different region. Compare to where we went in the is it Nakachuniment, that is the Karamoja. Karamoja, it is very dry, and then I remember when I tried to check on the plant, the what have been on time, and I've realized that the soil is quite dried. And then on that project, what was just needed, it is just regenerative. And then looking forward to have the agroforestry system, and then we see how we can now interact, or to have the introduction of predators. You talked about interaction of pests management. And then I've realized that also that is a key element when we are looking forward to build our ecosystem on that standard. Thank you, Steve, for more highlights you made. And I think everything was really, it was really a good discussion. And then the presentation was really, I would say it was clear on my side. And then I've learned a lot again. Thank you so much. Only my request will be on side of the refractometer, the one we used in Kumi. I remember you came with one.
Yes.
There is that possibility to share, or to have on each, I would say, site, or each trainer to have one to support on the angle where we we can keep also making some research, and then see how we are keeping building on our nutrients of our crops.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Clovis. Very welcome. And yes, we'll try and I've just joined the online support group for the Griffin Africa project. So I will keep you posted and keep us connected to that for sure. Ali, I see you back.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else like to contribute? We have a few minutes.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. About the micros here in terms of building health soils, it's definitely the way forward, because building health soils promotes health plants. And for that case, allow me to say thank you and to all people that are participating. So maybe to share what happened with the PDC, we finished the PDC now 1 week ago, or actually it's 2 weeks ago, and people from Mityana district, they are now already practicing what they learned from Butambala. And then we also managed to establish new systems at the center. And one of the key systems is now growing food from a controlled soil, because we are realizing that the soil there in Butambala is red clay soil, and we are trying our best to ensure that we really amend it by use of biochar. So biochar is one of the powerful methods. And in controlled soil, I mean, we are growing from sacks, especially the likes of zucchini, and then also cucumbers. So we are really following up and taking a journal notes on how the progress is. And then also we've been able also to ensure that we follow up with the people that are really practicing permaculture, especially in Butambara area and Mityana district. So permaculture has been expanded to Mityana district, which I'm happy about. And then there is also a request from a guy called Charis Opolot. He comes from Katakwi, a district next to Deborah Aluka. He is also keen about learning and understanding about permaculture. So I made a reference to Deborah so that she could try to engage him, since it's her home district. So, and then also another update is that during this holiday, we are starting children permaculture holiday program, which will run for 22 days, especially those children from vulnerable families before they go back to school. So let's look forward to that as we also try to engage young people, especially children around 11 to 15 years. We shall be educating them about permaculture 3 hours a day, and then also to see that at least by the time they go back to school, they have acquired some special skills about gardening and reconnecting with nature. So I believe that soil health is very important, and thank you so much, Steve, for that. Let's link up about the refractometer, as my colleague has just said, Clovis, because we really need it in Uganda so that we could really test the progress of the food nutrition, and then also ensure that we really produce and promote good health food. So thank you so much, Steve. That's all I have to share with the team, and big up, much love, and all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali. Wonderful to hear from you. I mean, something they talk about on the Griffin Network is, they say, once we understand this better and we have more data, is it might end up being, all you're really doing is bouncing light off the vegetable. So it might end up being an app on your phone even. And we buy food by the weight, by the volume. We don't buy it by its nutritional value. So isn't it interesting? Wouldn't it be such a change if, rather than buying a pound of carrots, you actually are measuring not the weight, but because that incentivizes us to industrial food produced by chemical agriculture is swollen with water. You're buying water. It's not more nutritious. You're just getting more volume, but it's not actually anything better for you. And one of the things that really staggered me was sometimes the nutritional value of a carrot might be 6 times more than one that's grown, in a non-organic, in an industrial process. So I think we need more data, and there's more exploration to be done, but clearly something very, very important here. And of course, a key point to make is, I'm talking about promoting mycorrhizal fungi by not disturbing the soil, by favoring the soil conditions. Those little tubes, those little hyphae, fungal hyphae, they're made out of a hard, durable form of carbon. So as those fungi live and die, they leave large amounts of carbon in the soil. So actually doing this is part of our climate change response, but actually we're doing it because it's going to give us nutrient dense, healthy soil, healthy food, which will be so healthy, it's actually resistant to pest attack, because the pests can't digest the food when it's so nutrient dense. It actually pickles them. They become like candied. So fascinating stuff. So, and you're so right to say, Ali, you know, with the climate change, it's not going to go away. We're going to have to build systems that are more resilient, and because temperatures are going to carry on rising for at least 10 years, even once we stop the emissions. So we're going to build systems that are going to be tested. And that's why I think the multi-layered forest garden type systems have to be a big part of the answer, because they're really resilient and shading, and they harvest and collect their own nutrients. Gerald, any closing thoughts from you? And thank you very much for your contribution earlier as well.
You're welcome, Steve. And it's always, you know, good to hear from the team and, you know, the developments around what is transpiring. I'm not thinking, but I'm sure we are on the path to a revolution, especially in East Africa and Africa in general, because apparently just this month, we've had about 4 activities running. So PDCs and trainings. And then also it's good to see that we are also now progressing into the capacity building and research aspect of our work. So really, if the Griffin network, all that access is available, it would be really brilliant to have our team members keying in all that data, adding to the research, very vital research, because it means a lot. It's a whole continuum or aspect to plants and nutrition and the overall resilience. So it's always good to have these sessions, and yes, to get to hear from the team. Over to you, Steve, for the closing bit.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Gerald. We've entered our 3rd term. We want to really challenge all of our learners and participants, whether you're seeing this live or whether you're catching up on YouTube or later, we need your feedback. We want to hear your stories. How are you applying permaculture in your context? What are your design ideas? What do you have a design challenge? Do you have an objective in mind? That's what we want to hear about. And yes, so I thank everybody for your attention and for taking part again in this week's session. And we'll look forward to seeing you all again next week for number, what are we, 18? Yeah, we're getting there. 7 more to go. But say I'm looking more and more for questions, or we can get into a bit more detail of some areas, but think carefully about how we use this time. And we're going to start thinking about, we're going to set up some kind of a WhatsApp group. We're going to have some kind of ongoing conversation dialogue between all of our learners, and let's think about how we want to do that. So with that as a closing thought, I shall bid everyone a very good evening.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks everyone. Ali, it's always a pleasure to catch up.
Yeah, really.
And well done on that good work. I'm happy that you're pushing on and also taking it to the kids. I remember all those awesome projects we were running. So it's always great to know that someone is carrying on.
Pleasure, pleasure. Thank you, Gerard. Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
All right.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye, Simon. Bye bye, Stella.
Bye, bye.
Bye.